Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. And I can see the top of my head's cut off. Can't have that. Anyway, welcome back, everybody, and yay for Simone Anderson again, having her back after a couple of weeks that she's been away gallivanting and doing her own thing, and has just been to Vegas. So we're going to be hearing all about her shenanigans and gallivantings in Vegas. But before we go there, I'm just going to pop up the schedule for this week. Okie dokie, let's see. Okay, Simone Anderson, obviously, right now live as we speak. Double Trouble with Jesse tomorrow, so look forward to that. And then, of course, on Thursday, on Solutions with Shanti, I started a new series, The Mirror Universe, recognizing, before that we did the protection patterning. So when you understand your own patterning, now you can understand how that is mirrored in the universe and in the world around you. So how do you recognize when God is speaking to you through anything, signs, symbols, movies, whatever, recognizing the mirror, basically. And then, of course, we have Dr. Dennis on Thursday. We're doing part 2 of The Woman of the Vril. And then drop in with Shanti on Friday, starting the new series, basically, on South Africa, from settlement to current crisis. What I'm doing there is really I've taken the thread through pre-colonization by the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC, and how they originally settled in Cape Town, the Cape of Good Hope. But what was their intention behind that? Because then we can see how everything is playing itself out through first the settlement, right, which pretty much became colonization, and then the colonization, and then the land reform, and how it's all been systematically done to where we are today with this horrific crisis in Africa, where literally there's civil war on our streets at the moment. South Africa has chosen, the South African Black people have chosen to absolutely kick out every foreign immigrant, whether they're legal or illegal, and has created a lot of far-reaching effects, which now is to the point where other African countries are shutting down their South African businesses. South African truck drivers are now also being unalived that are doing business in other African countries. So, we're seeing a huge eruption and disruption in the entire Africa right now. And we must remember, Africa is the most southern point of the globe. So it affects everyone. And we talk about South Africa being the gateway to the New World Order. Very, very interesting. So join me for that. Drop in with Shanti. And talk about the spiritual gateways, the Shatauri, which is the African lizard beings, and what Credo Mutwe spoke about there as well. So super interesting. And then, of course, Sunday Loop with Jessie. I'm not sure it's Jessie, actually. She's often on a Sunday, though, but it's reruns from past shows or shows that we haven't aired yet. So yay, that's the announcements for the week. Well, I thought Simone was sitting there, but she's obviously gone on to do something for a minute. I'm sure she'll be back in a minute. In the meantime, hello, everybody. Hello, Lisa D, Coast Rider, Jelena, Leanne. So nice to see you guys again. We'll just see where Simone is. But in the meantime, you all know, if you haven't watched my previous shows with Simone, I think Kosika cool. She is. She's
there. I am.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my handsome roommate, the actor that's going to pop in a little later at the end of the show to say hello before he comes on your show at a later date. We'll get some real
Absolutely.
Hollywood talent on the show these days.
The crazy thing is, it was so, as a kid, growing up in South Africa, we were completely isolated because of sanctions and stuff around us. But we had American music and like pop music, and I was completely, as everyone already knows, I was completely in love with Jimmy Osmond. I was convinced when I grow up, I'm going to go live in America and I'm going to marry Jimmy Osmond. So, you know what's
Oh,
really cool is that I now have this channel where I can speak to anyone in America. Isn't that amazing?
isn't it
It's like
crazy?
I used to have this idea as a kid. And as a small child, I used to think, what if your watch had a TV on it? Not like a TV, but a face, like a telephone, where you could talk and then you could see the person's face. I used to imagine these things as a child. And now they're here. But I certainly don't have any of that stuff. I can tell you that for sure. I have my phone and my laptop, and that's about the extent of my technology. But it's amazing, as a kid, when you think about the dreams you had and what you used to yearn for, and how I find so many things later on in life, especially now, have actually, I've created them.
Right?
Maybe it was part
Got
of,
to real.
yeah, that's
Dr.
actually quite
Word.
amazing. But
No,
I
I
didn't get to
definitely
marry
believe
Jimmy Osmond.
that. Well, I think you may have grown out of that now. I think I don't know what
Well,
happened to that. Well, I guess one of the Osmonds has a big show in Vegas.
yeah.
Joseph in the Technicolor raincoat.
Is that not Donnie? I think Donnie and Marie.
Oh, that's
But
Donnie, right,
I
right.
think, but I think Marie passed on, didn't she? Or am I
I
wrong?
don't know. I don't remember. I mean, I saw her interviewed a few years ago. I think Donnie and Marie are some of the biggest I've heard them say on their shows in more countries. That's one of the biggest shows ever made
Yeah,
internationally.
so crazy, right? And all I could think about was Jimmy Osmond singing "I'll Be Your Long-Haired Lover" from Liverpool. Come on, you got to remember that. Who remembers Jimmy Osmond? Am I the only Jimmy Osmond fan here? Stop
Right.
it. Well, I'm very
That's
happy because I
crazy.
I had such a super crush on him. He was like the same age as me. So anyway, but listen, speaking about that, you've just been to Vegas, and all I know about Vegas is like the movies. It looks like hell on earth, I have to tell you, to me, with all those casinos and all those loud, I don't know, neon lights. I could not imagine. I think I would run out of there within 3 seconds of arriving, or I'd probably be shot out of there. I can't. But yet you look at areas around, and I don't know America at all. I've never been there, but yet you look around there, and it's very beautiful. The desert, I love that. You see, I'm a very much a desert person. So that ancient desert, that looks really, really cool. So how was Vegas, and what did you do, and who was
So
there?
right. Well, first of all, Vegas is beautiful. I mean, it's its own kind of city. It's grown incredibly. I lived here from 2000 to 2008, and it's a tax haven. So I actually sold a company in 2000, and I wanted to move somewhere where I could keep more of my profit. So Nevada is a great state for that. They don't have any state tax, where California has anywhere from 10 to 12% income tax. Nevada doesn't have that. So we have a lot of major corporations like the banks and a lot of tech companies that are based here for that reason. But the city itself and the surrounding area is gorgeous. There's a lot of people when they come to Vegas, they don't think, but there's mountain biking, hiking, skiing. There's a ski slope near here. You can go straight up the mountain to about 7,000
Fake
feet.
snow? Does it
No,
have
it's
fake
not fake
snow?
snow. It's real snow. Yeah.
Oh wow, really?
It's like a family slope. It's really great to start like your first couple skis when you're getting your legs back in shape. And, there's families up there. It's a great place to learn to ski. So many people don't think about Las Vegas and going skiing, but it's actually possible. And the
Wow.
casinos have massively grown since I was here. I don't even recognize some of the parts of town. Where I used to live, there's 15 freeway exits past where my house was now, completely built out. 15
Wow.
exits. Yeah. And that's on each direction in town. I was just in the north part. But I was here for the Red Pill
Wow.
Expo, and it was super exciting. If anyone's ever read The Creature from Jekyll Island, it was G.A. Edward Griffin. He's a very famous writer here, very prolific, and a documentary filmmaker. And he's 94 years old, and he's a great inspiration to anybody that believes there's nothing an individual can do to change the reality they exist in. And he's a living example. And he got up and spoke for 3 or 4 hours at a time, spoke for an hour, hour and a half, and then took questions for another 2-3 hours. So he's incredible. We were supposed to have Alex Jones, but for some reason he didn't show up. But we had Juan O'Savin, and I know a lot of people may be familiar with him. So Juan was there at the event. And Lynette Zhang, she's an expert on precious metals and building your portfolio and creating a safe environment, especially for your retirement. So she was super interesting. She came off Wall Street. She was right down my alley and really confirmed a lot of the things that I've been thinking, but it's coming from someone who's like an expert in it every day. So it was pretty exciting to see her talk. And then Michael Yon, I'm not sure, he is a famous war correspondent. He was a highly decorated officer, military person himself. And then he was behind the enemy lines in Afghanistan and Iraq and really reporting on what was really going on, including human trafficking and those things. And he just is having his first child. So he's obviously pretty excited about that. And he mentioned it probably 15 times in his speech. So congratulations to Michael. And then Alex Newman is an investigative journalist. I'm not sure if you've seen much of his stuff, but he really went in depth on various topics. And it was not just a meeting to hear the speakers. It was a meeting, like many of these events, for like-minded people to come talk to other people who care about the things they care about. People are talking from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night in the lobby. We're trading information. We're interviewing each other. We are finding out more about the world that we live in. And it's really exciting because most of us can't talk to these things with our family or our friends. Right. And we can with some. So again, everybody's hoarse at the end because they finally get to say what they've been thinking about for a year. And
that's
to somebody
amazing.
who doesn't roll their eyes at them.
It's actually, it's so true what you say. And I think that is such an important thing at this stage, because so many times, I get comments, in the shows, or I have people messaging me, and they will say things like, no one in my area understands this. I have no one to speak to. No one, that sense of isolation.
Yes.
And I love that we actually have these communities, because it's true. Even if people have these diverse ideas, I love that we have diverse ideas, because it's that diversity actually that brings us together. If we can understand how everything actually works together coherently, actually, if we're willing to see it that way. So, even I see us often as, well, the only way is like playing for the same team, but we're all in different positions. I can't be doing your job there because I don't have the skills to do your job, but I know damn well that you're doing a damn fine job doing what you're doing. I'm doing and so is everyone else doing what they're doing. But what happens is people start splitting, right? And that's also how then the division happens, because they start feeling like they've got to compete with each other. And my idea is better than yours, and I'm more awake than what you are. And
right. Human nature gets involved in any kind of group activity.
And this is what we have to get through. This is the chaos I see right now, because, from out of the chaos, the peace is born if we choose to allow that. You've got to be the stillness in the storm. And the chaos almost allows us to find that stillness if you're willing to, and then you discern, because you're not going to be able to discern before that. And that's why I love that we have these gatherings and, like you said, these conferences where people can actually get together and share ideas and collaborate together and get the word out there, because I don't know so many stories from so many different survivors, yet such similar experiences, all a similar thread, different experiences, right? But the same ingredients. And that's
Well,
what
and
we're
I've been
seeing.
talking about that a little bit when I do my speeches, because my topics, they're all pretty controversial. And so
Yeah,
I always try to add that a little bit in, saying, everybody wants freedom of speech unless you disagree with what someone's saying.
yeah,
You don't agree with anyone not you don't agree with your own spouse 100% of the time. Why do you expect a total stranger to disagree with you? It opens our minds to new concepts. And,
exactly.
with the way that it's really going to work out is bringing everybody's ideas together like they do in certain situations. And when you're in a business strategy or you're solving a problem in your town, you bring everybody together and you try to suss out what's going to be the most important thing and what's going to be the most helpful to everyone. Also, we have a lot of the major media people, because the mainstream media has failed. Nobody believes them anymore. They have terrible numbers. So a lot of them have infiltrated, and you can see even the smaller time podcasters who've kind of sold out. And they get
Totally.
all the, if you're on the top algorithm all the time of YouTube or Rumble, and there's a million other people and they're never on the first thing, there's something going on there, right? And
Totally.
especially as a person whose content gets, tagged a lot. I watch other people who are doing similar content and they're just doing fine. They're just frequently not doing the depth of research, but they're kind of reporting on it, but they're not really reporting on it. So I think we have to be aware that the media is the new venue. It was the television for our parents. It was the radio for our grandparents. And these are the mediums that are controlling our world. So again,
Social media for our kids, right? So,
exactly.
and it's so true what you say. Sorry to chime in there, but it's like the mainstream media is starting to fail. They're crumbling.
Oh,
So
no, they've completely failed, especially
yes,
since USAID was supporting the major news networks. And once their money got cut off, a lot of shows were canceled. There was no reason for Jimmy Kimmel to cost $100 million a year and only be bringing in 15 million. I mean, who's paying for that? You
right.
understand it's propaganda.
It's an agenda. It's an agenda that's being pushed. And I think what's happening now is that a lot of those media people are now, as you say, very often have their own independent platforms and maybe joining other agencies or what have you. But they are now maybe pushing a slightly different narrative, but nonetheless still controlled, in my opinion.
Well, and it's
Most
also creating the same thing the news media was to create division within the public. So we don't notice
exactly.
what they're really doing. And that's the real focus. And I totally agree with what you just said.
And you know what we need right now is not, and it's like, I always say this, there's so much noise. Wow. I mean, if you just go scroll on any one of your social media platforms, there's someone shouting about Trump or Erica Kirk or I don't know who else. I mean, there's a million of them. And right now in Africa, all this chaos that's happening here, it's just, and these frantic voices, da da da. And what is so clear to me is that we actually need calmness now. We have to remain calm. We have to be that calm, steady voice that is not necessarily heard right now because you're not shouting louder than anyone, but it's the voice that travels through the airwaves and can't be destroyed because it's true. It's truth, right? It's of God, of the
We'll see.
Creator.
Here in America, we've known since the 1970s in congressional hearings that over 80% of the news media was CIA or being
Yeah.
sponsored by the CIA. So we are aware that in the United States, our media, and most people, they'll say, oh no, I'm a Fox person, I'm a CNN person, or what, I'm a CNBC person. But we need to understand that it's part of the military industrial complex, the media, and the goal of the 24 news cycle is to keep us all stressed out, to get support for wars we never would have supported. I mean, the same people in the Republican Party today that were against all the wars in the last era are now supporting the wars in this administration, some of which are the same wars. So it's a game, and it's just to keep us all wound up. I mean, when here in the States, when the Ukraine war thing broke out, you would literally see people with Ukrainian flags. People had these little things on their shirt. And I'm like, they didn't even have that when our own country was at war. Why are they so? But it was a huge psyop. And you drive around today, and the same people I said to someone the other day that was all, oh, you know, this war is just going to end. And everybody for war, this thing where they like, it's like a team sport. Oh, I'm on their side, they're on their side. If anyone's ever been in a war zone, the stench of death, the destruction, the people, young men on both sides who will never grow up to have a family, who will never, you know, fulfill their parents' dreams of having a better life than they did, all of these things. And people would come on my channel and they say to me before they come on, because, you know, we may know each other in the past and know that we disagree on something. And I'm like, look, as long as you do not blaspheme or swear on my channel, you are free to say anything you want to say, because this is an interview about you and what you think, not about me. If I could just be on my own channel and I don't need to have guests if I just want to have my chirped, you know, repeated response back to me. And that's what we have to learn, to have dialogue that doesn't personally offend us when we disagree. Instead, we need to find more concrete arguments to express ourselves and make them more logical, or we need to listen to what the other person is saying and open our mind to maybe we hadn't considered all options. And this is what a critical thinker does. And critical thinking is something that no longer happens. But I myself live in a republic, a constitutional republic. I do not live in a democracy. Democracy is a communist word. It means mob rule, where the individual has no presence. So they're constantly talking about, they wish we were in a democracy where a mob rules and individual people have no rights. And we do not live in that. And people say, and I suggest they just review the titles of the Chinese Soviet Socialist Republic or the USSR. It tells you right there. But in the structure that I live in, a constitutional republic, at the time my government no longer serves me, I am told by the Constitution of both my state and my government that I must stand up against the tyranny, and I must stand up. If I'm not free from invasion, I'm not safe, and I don't have opportunity, and my rulers are tyranny, it is my duty to rise up to them legally and peacefully, and replace them with people who do serve the constitutional republic. And this is what Americans need to understand. We need to understand the governing documents of our own country and the tools that we have to fight back. And you were talking about making groups. You have Facebook. We have all these free forums. On Monday, on Sunday, and Wednesday night, I attend a group where we are trying to restructure the state of California that's bankrupt. And you can't go bankrupt as a state, but our state has not been able to balance its books for the last 4 years. And we're coming to a major millstone. So for the last 2 years on Sunday and Wednesday nights, I attend meetings about regrouping and replanning what our state's going to look like in the future. On Tuesday nights, I study our Constitution and our Federalist Papers with a group of like-minded people so we can understand what our legal rights are and how we can legally push back. So people can do this. This is how you get out. The Zoom has put you and I together who would have never met. And the Zoom can put you with another person that lives in another town in South Africa. And then you can put
Right.
someone, you can do a channel for the refugees who are leaving, who have concerns about coming back. They can talk to the people that are still there. There are so many ways we can help our fellow man. And sometimes it's just the support that knowing someone else is out there that's on your side and that's praying for you. And that is in
Absolutely.
the same mindset. And it's super easy to find. We found
Yeah,
each other, and we live thousands and thousands of miles apart. So definitely
exactly.
people in your town can find somebody to talk to.
Absolutely. You know, I think more than anything, it's also overcoming your fears of not being understood or rejected or being thought of as crazy or whatever. Honestly, if I if I had stopped, if I'd been conquered by other people's opinions of me, I promise you I would not have been anywhere close to sitting here today,
Sure.
because I've always gone against the grain. I've always
Well, and
had
me
people.
too. So for me,
Yeah,
it's not as hard as it is for some other people. Have always,
right.
when I went to work in Russia, and it was still a communist country, and I was like thinking I was going to do a big deal there and make a lot of money, and I did, but everyone else around me just was laughing at me. You're going to lose your money, you're going to, and eventually I did lose a lot of money there, but eventually I didn't. But I went there for other reasons. We were telling the whole world that communism is bad, but we were letting the Russians just starve to death because their system had collapsed, and it would just reoccur again if we didn't reach out to help them. And so as a young
Mm.
person, that was what I did. My mission was to help the United States. And the work I did for 10 years was to help the Russia and the United States repair their problems so the world would be a safer, better place. And in the long run, that has worked out. And I was a very small part of that. So, and just like
Well,
you, your work, your country's in a revolution right now. Who knows in the future how important some of the information you shared is going to be for your fellow countrymen, especially when they want to open their eyes finally.
it's so true, you know, and this is the thing about being the person who's not afraid to do that kind of stuff. Like you speaking about yourself going to Russia and everyone going, "Pah," right? And I mean, as I said, I've had that plenty in my life. I still do. Um, the people like you are the ones who do the repair. It's like, you know, when an aeroplane is flying, we see the beautiful, shining, brightly awesome spray painted steel bird in the sky with the impressive pilot who's pushing buttons to get everyone there. But to get that bird to fly, there's so many technicians behind the scenes who
Yes.
never get recognition, who never even get acknowledged for safely landing 500 people. It's the captain who says, "Oh, we've safely landed. Thank you. This is Captain so and so speaking. I'll see you next time," right? So he gets the recognition. And that's what I'm saying. In this entire system, there are so many people working behind the scenes who are the ones who are not doing the upfront shouting and what have you.
Right.
It's what I keep saying. It's like this channel, the stuff that we started speaking about on our first interviews, right? With people like Jesse, like David Zublik, right? We went right in there. People are only starting to scratch the surface on now on the, and that's a good thing, because I think in many ways there's a large percentage of conscious minded people who've had their eyes closed, and part of that is to wake up by seeing, let's say, first the celebrities falling, and like that kind of stuff. I think there is value to that as well, a lot of value, because the people are at different stages, but there's also gatekeepers who know that. And the
Exactly.
gatekeepers keep people stuck in that cycle of just, look, I'm like, guys, we've now seen 10 celebrities do the same thing. Now we can be pretty sure that 10,000 of them are doing the same thing, because now we've understood the template. Let's move on from the celebrities. Let's go deeper. How have we knowingly or unknowingly contributed to this dumbed down society, because if you hear, then you have, whether you
Right.
like to admit that or not, right? So that's what I say is we've got to become conscious of our own patterns, our own
Yes.
shit. That's how we change the world, not by deciding that 20 cannibals have to go to Gitmo and screaming and shouting about that. That's going to
Right.
happen. They
It
pay
has
their own
happened. It is
karma.
happening.
Yeah.
Um,
And they pay their own karma, because at the end of the day, that's how it works. You always going to get what you've given. Always. Always. And I
well,
trust that.
we're going
Mhm.
through a lot of changes here in the United States. The United States, after the Civil War, into the Depression, and as far as when they took us off the gold standard in 1970, was slowly captured back into the British Commonwealth, starting with the Civil War. And
Right.
if you notice that Donald Trump has visited England several times, he stays in Windsor Castle. The royal family no longer stays there. He walks in front of them. And the King of England recently came to the United States before Donald Trump did that big ritual thing on the front lawn. And what happened during that time is the Constitution was returned to the United States because, and during the Civil War, they replaced our Constitution with a corporate document that the original contract still existed. But what that contract did was actually, instead of making the government servants of the people, it made the servants, the government was the owner of the people. And over time that transitioned. I've never looked into really how South Africa works, and that would be interesting. Sometime maybe I'll do that. But subsequently, the following week, after the king came and subjugated, and the United States returned to its original construct, and the corporation that's been controlling our country went bankrupt several years ago, we now, I went to the state capital of the state of California, and a group of us who are involved in a group called Reorganize California. Our state is bankrupt. Therefore, we do not have the ability to enter into contract. And the government is currently stealing the government employee pension funds to pay their current obligations and living on all the disaster relief that came in for the people's houses who burnt down and businesses were destroyed. Our state has pocketed most of that money to pay their own obligations. So the fact that our state is bankrupt and been unable to pass audit for several years means we're in default with the compact we have with the United States. The cities and counties can go bankrupt, but the federal government, the state cannot. So we're in a reorganized movement of the state. We went down and declared, we had a similar situation where they put the corporate fake document into our state in 1879. So we just rejected that constitution and returned to our 1849 constitution. And so that is the beginning of the restructuring of California. So we can do this. We are doing this. We travel all over the state. We have representatives in every county. We have our own assembly. We have our own Senate. We have our own constitution. We've written all of our own bills, from water rights, all of the things California is facing, from water rights to education. We have our own Doge committee of all volunteers. We found over $2 trillion in theft from the California state government. We've turned it all into the Department of Justice, awaiting persecution for some of the major crimes. So you can do it. You can do it. We've done all of this with $2 million in 8 years. We've traveled all over the world, not all over the country. Some other states are following our example, and we are currently on the president's desk as a new organized state. So there is something you can do. You can go to your own state house. The employees of California are banned from speaking to me in any way because you're stirring it up. And it's not me, these other people. I've only been involved in the movement for 2 years, but they started out 8 years ago when we saw the bankruptcy of our state. Literally, our governor and the governors of the West Coast of the United States had been taking illegal loans to balance their budgets because they had all of these, they were stealing. It was the NGOs. They were just outright theft, right? All of the illegal money given during COVID, hundreds of billions of dollars collected by people who were never even alive. And so during that time between Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, they were taking illegal loans so they could balance the budget under the book, which is against IMF. But a lot of countries and a lot of states were taking illegal loans, and they were pledging our state and federal lands, which 50% of California is owned by the state or federal government. It also has some of the largest oil and gas reserves and gold, lithium, rare earth deposits in all these areas where the fires were. So there is a long-term strategy to cover up the bankruptcy of the state of California. And in their system, they will join China in a company called Cascadia. And that would be Hawaii, California. And if Hillary Clinton would win as president, there was 3,000 Chinese tanks on the border of Guatemala and Mexico, and they were going to roll into California, and because they had pledged our state and federal lands as the collateral, and we defaulted on those loans. And so the Chinese government was literally even though they were illegal contracts, they believed they had the right to invade our country and conquer those lands. So we here on the West Coast are not in a civil war. We're actually in a war with a foreign hostile nation that's trying to take over the West Coast of the United States. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, but when you look into everything I just said, this is really what's going on. This is really the chaos we're seeing. This is the riots in the street. When we see the ICE agents taking all of the people, these are the cartels. They moved several million people into the United States who were cartel members, who were military age. If you look at Michael Yon, who was the war correspondent, he has in-depth studies. He shows every major city in Europe also is surrounded by these camps. And they basically, like in Ireland, that's one of the things that's really going on in Ireland, is they've set up military occupation camps around all the major cities full of the people who are opposed to their life, or opposed to their political views, opposed to their religious views. So in the United States, we have large camps of foreign hostile people camped all over our nation, and camps sponsored by the government and the military, because again, the military of the United States is controlled by the City of London, not the United States, just like the Vatican and the City of London. Those are the three city-states that control the world, and the United States is the blood that is shed to achieve the goals of the Vatican and the City of London.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think we've ascertained the Vatican is really the hive of where the evil, the core.
Right. Well, the Holy See is technically who owns the Vatican system. So, and if you went to USAID, and the Vatican has been bankrupt because they lost a lot of things. Again, their system that controlled the United States went bankrupt. So the United States taxpayers were literally paying all the pedophile price pensions through USAID from the time of the Obama administration, not the Obama, the Biden administration, because it had gone bankrupt during that time. So it's your tax dollars and your tax money that's going. The Vatican is also the largest slave trader in the world. So when we see the Jesuits involved in child trafficking in Mexico, child trafficking in the United States, the Jesuits controlled California before California became a state in 1849. We're the only state that actually has slavery illegal in our Constitution. It's actually in our Constitution. But unfortunately, we are the largest slave state in the nation outside China. We believe there's over 2 million people living in forced labor, sexual slavery, and organ harvesting camps just right here in California. And that's something that a lot of people were not aware of, but over the last few years, people have become aware of it. And there's a consciousness that's taking hold in our state, and people are aware that something has gone wrong. And every day people are standing up in their own little way. If you're a grandma at home, knit some blankets for the child rescue center that's near your house. Get on the phone, call all your friends, get them to events. You don't have to spend money. All that we ask is your time and your duty to humanity, really, because what is that saying? Evil persists when good men do nothing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, like
What
kind of the City of London kind of gets right into Robert Maxwell, because kind of I think that's what we were going to talk about today.
Well, exactly. I just wanted to say, what you're describing and the rest is exactly what's happening here. The civil unrest, okay, happening again, borders, confusion, and especially, and yeah, there's a lot of the human trafficking. Now, of course, whenever there's such a border crisis or immigration crisis, right, people are not documented. People don't have the right documents. So I've been hearing horrific stories about people getting whisked off at night and not being brought back. And now, a few days later, I'm seeing stuff on how suddenly there's a lot of organs that are for sale.
And that's right. Like in Mexico, part of what happened in Mexico was the cartels, human trafficking. That was what was really going on in Puerto Vallarta, and they were taking down that. And now children, according to my assistant that works down there, because they've cut off all the caravans and they've exposed these trafficking lines, all of a sudden around Mexico, children are starting to disappear again because they have to feed the pipeline somehow. And war is human. The reason that they create war, because the bankers are financing both sides. The City of London is financing both sides of the war that you have going, or the 3 sides or the 4 sides. And what is created from war? Debt. And when you have debt, you control a country. And Rothschild said he didn't care who the king or the president was, because he controlled them through the banking system. And exactly. So war is, and a lot of Africa, slavery is still openly practiced. So totally. This isn't some random thing that's just like out of the blue, right? It's still openly practiced in a lot of countries. Everyone's heard about it. And I
want to make sure, I just want to be clear on that, because there's a perception that the white people in South Africa own black slaves. That is so not true, by the way. We're talking about slavery. Remember, Africa is extremely tribal.
Yes.
So there's a lot of countries at war with each other that capture the prisoners of war, yes. And those people are used as slaves. So it's not got nothing to do with white-face slavery. I just want to make that very clear.
Well, and even in the American slave trade, they were saying, like it was the tribes that were selling. It was frequently the Arabs.
Yes.
That were going down and getting the Africans from the other tribes. And because they had the boats and stuff, right, to take the people out there. And they Egypt. Had they had the trade routes, up into the Middle East and up into Europe. Like, that's Muhammad was a trader, right? His wife was a trader. And so I imagine they, traded slaves. That was really, really common. So a lot of people, slavery comes from this part of the world, and it exploded into all the rest of the parts of the world. You go back in ancient history, I know we did that series on Islam with you. Slavery is a huge part of the Islamic, a lot of what was happening when they were raiding and they were kidnapping the people, and then they would sell the slaves, and then people would find out they were coming because they were killed if they didn't convert. So they would all convert, and then the Arabs were losing all this money because everyone was converting and they didn't get the slaves to sell. So they had a raiding issue. If you just converted the day before they got there, they could still buy and sell you, even as another Muslim, because they said, oh, well, you're just joining Muslims so you don't get killed. Well, yeah, because that's your religion. If you don't submit, they killed you. That's how it spread. Because Africa, Ethiopia was the second largest Christian nation. Some of the other African nations followed shortly after. So that part of the world was Christian before they were forcibly converted under Islam. And we can see
Right.
the same in Iran. The Iranians were Zoroastrians, but there was also a heavy Christian population that lived in Iran. And if you notice, the major outcome today of all the wars in the Middle East is there's very few Christians left in those countries. Yeah. Very few.
I agree. There's been a huge, this war has absolutely, it's been a way of, I want to say, muddying the waters for everyone, because, it's about land control. It's about population control. It's about DNA, and especially
slavery.
Yeah,
slavery has supported many cultures and many monarchies, right? The British, they didn't want to close the slave system because they thought it would cause a 35% decline in the stock market. And when they finally did, people like Kamala Harris's family that were slave traders and Joe Biden's family who were slave traders. In fact, Joe Biden's family co-founded the transatlantic slave trade back in Ireland in the 13th century. The way they got them to free their slaves was not through the war and the murder of 500,000 American Northerners, but by getting paid off by the British Crown. And both Kamala Harris' family and Joe Biden's family received money from the British Crown for the slaves they lost in 1836. So even when the slave owners have to give up their slaves, somehow they're compensated for it. And these are the same people that are running around saying that that they're helping Black people get paid for their past crimes, right? And they're actually collecting a check every month for the crimes that their own ancestors committed against the slaves 200 years ago.
I mean, it's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing, actually, when you see and how it's still continuing. One would think that at some point this ends, but it becomes worse with every generation. These people, I mean, it's wild. It's really, really wild. Wow.
Well, Epstein and Robert Maxwell, as I've discussed in the past, are agents of this system. And they are slaves themselves, right? They most likely were pledged into the system by their parents or their grandparents. Their minds were broken, as we've talked about, and they abused their own children, and they punished their own children and tortured their own children. So they have no consciousness, and they continue. People are like, well, why do they do this? Why do they do this? It's to remove any form of consciousness. And this is when you understand what the communism is about, it's bringing, in one instance, it's about collectivism, but on the other instance, it's really about the system of slavery, right? They act like it's going to be great for you. I mean, slavery, communism is modern day slavery. They just needed to repackage it and saying, oh, well, we're going to take care, because the slave owners technically housed people, fed people, clothed people. I mean, that was the system. As an owner, you had
to earn nothing and you'll be happy.
Right. And that's what communism is. So it's just a new repackaging by the same Vatican system created communism, right? Communism is the brainchild of the papacy and the Vatican. So, and that's what the United Nations is brought together to form, a whole world under one government, one religion, where we're all slaves in the system. And like you said, the agents openly talk about it. We're going to be happy and be nothing. So as we talk about all these things, you're just like, how do they have such a huge organization? How do they get these people and these politicians to do all this stuff? Because those people seem like, when you met them in person, I've met a lot of politicians, I've met their wives, and they seem pretty nice. I'm like, why are they doing this? But this is why, because one of the main things that our government agents do, and what Robert Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were involved in doing, and a lot of governments that work with the United States, is laundering money. And this is now, Robert Maxwell was the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. By the way, is a French man's name. So from the beginning, you understand that a lot of these families also practice gender inversion, which is part of the UN agenda. So Menashe is a guy who was with in military intelligence in Israel until he realized that Israel had no intention of ever becoming friendly with their neighbors. They, in fact, wanted to conquer them and slaughter them. So he left and went to Egyptian intelligence. But he was there when Robert Maxwell was laundering the money that was coming out of Iran-Contra and laundering the money for the U.S. Military and the people that were stealing on behalf of, not that, I mean, U.S. military has done a lot of really good things, and there's a lot of people, especially when they go in saving people, a lot of people I know are really honorable service people. And again, we're talking about the rogue element that use the innocents to promote their agendas, right? So he explains that Robert Maxwell was laundering money for the Israeli government, and that Menashe was introduced to Epstein by Robert Maxwell, and Maxwell wanted Epstein to work with him on the Iran policy. So all the things we're seeing today have really been in play with the same group of people since I was actually in grade school. So that's why I like to kind of show overall history and show how it's still alive and well today, and how we got to the situation that we're in, and why we keep seeing all these same players and these same family bloodlines. And you can go back 1,000 years and see why these same family bloodlines have caused the wars, have caused the atrocities, and still come out on top after the war was over when everyone else was devastated. But Menashe refused to take Epstein on because he said he was stupid. And he was afraid he would screw up any mission that he put him on. And even though in later dates, they claim that Ghislaine Maxwell only met Jeffrey Epstein when they met in New York. But in fact, as we'll see through here, that they've had a long-term relationship and known each other most of their lives. And so during the business relationship, Maxwell told Menashe he had hoped to marry his daughter to Epstein. And then originally Epstein did date Ghislaine, but the relationship ended in a more like buddy system. And they're like, oh, we're buddy. No, they're spies and they're marks. So they're working together. The romance was probably just because Jeffrey Epstein didn't really like anybody over 20 years old, even younger. So that didn't work. But as we understand that a lot of these marriages are political and surface marriages, when you see the Clintons, things like that. I mean,
it's like two evil twins. To me, it's like two little evil twins that got together and conspired as to how evil they could be. You know what I'm saying?
If you understand the structure, Hillary Clinton and both Michelle Obama are much higher level in the system. My personal belief is that they were more the handlers of their husbands. And Jeffrey Epstein not only groomed young girls to sleep with wealthy men. You look at his list of people involved, a lot of the monarchies, the marriages were arranged. So they basically had someone from inside the system that was a confidant of the most powerful men and women in the world. So he was not only grooming the poor and the helpless, he was literally working with the bloodline families of Europe to infiltrate different aspects of the government and to put their bloodline in place and mix it in with the monarchies, because they're very interested in their bloodlines. That's why, like, they all marry their own relatives because they want to keep it pure. Plus that just they're into incest and they're into pedophilia. So it's really easy to keep it quiet in your own family.
Well, not really when you're looking from the outside in, because you've generally got a slurping forehead or a Habsburg jaw or something.
And that is so true, but most people aren't hip on those things. And we, living here in the United States, we have so many cultural mixes. We don't have just like a look, right?
Right.
You go to Scandinavia, people look much more similar than they do here. So I personally lived and worked in a lot of like intelligence circles. I wasn't intelligence, but I was around a lot of those circles. And I learned a lot about identifying people's features, of identifying their mannerisms just from when you live in the communist during the fall of a communist regime. There's no TV, there's no entertainment, there's no stores to go to, the restaurants are closed. So you really, really learn about the people that you randomly live with on your job project. So I'm kind of getting off on the topic. So originally Epstein, like we were saying, he was supposedly intended to marry Ghislaine, but instead they seemed to sleep together a lot and have sexual relationships and threesomes and foursomes and orgies and stuff. So they were still involved on some level, but yeah, not on a romantic one. And so again, when you go back into Epstein and Maxwell's family line, they are related to the royal family through Vlad the Impaler, frequently known as Dracula. So according to the victim's court pleading, she often joined into the sexual encounters. She actually scouted children and young women and lures them into blackmail schemes by seducing them. You know, usually they had like weak family backgrounds and they felt very important to be asked by these rich and famous people who were very sophisticated to be involved in some of these kind of things. But after they became involved and they realized what was going on and they didn't want to do it anymore, they were actually threatened with death by Ghislaine and her group. So although some things may have been consensual in the beginning, over time, these people were literally just pegs in the big board that they were working on. Mainly their blackmail and extortion plots. And actually, this is a chapter of a book I'm working on that I'm reading from right now. And the name of the chapter is They Blackmailed Everyone Who Was Anyone, allegedly. So.
Allegedly, of course.
Because of course we still haven't located any of the people that were buying or sleeping with these children. And if you come to understand, they want to bring Jeffrey Epstein, but I believe it was a multinational Five Eyes project of the spying, and that the spying was on a much larger level than it would just Ghislaine, and they were just some cogs in the wheel. And I'm going to get into other people in other countries that were doing the exact same jobs. I've never looked into who in South Africa. That might be something I try to look into. Who was the handler in South Africa for this system? Are you aware of anyone?
Definitely the British Crown, Prince Philip, actually. If we're speaking to Beverly Rhodes, I don't know if you know Beverly Rhodes at all, or any of our viewers. And if you haven't, please watch her shows. She was a psychic for the ex-presidents of South Africa. So, and now Cecil John Rhodes, Beverly Rhodes, right? So she was. How her situation worked was that her mother had her very late and couldn't afford to have her anymore. So then she gave her to the sister, her older sister, who was as a gift baby. They couldn't have kids. So then her sister became her mom, right? She didn't know that. And then the sister's husband was Patrick Daniel Rhodes. And he was Beverly's abuser and handler. And horrific stories. I'm just giving you guys some background. So watch my shows with Beverly Rhodes, because she talks about when they came to South Africa. She arrived here in the 70s sometime, born in the UK. And Patrick Daniel Rhodes he was a sales director of Marley Roof Tiles, big company, and he set up the child trafficking rings here then. But prior to that, they were set up already in Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia, by Cecil John Rhodes and friends. So they were always under the British Crown, Prince Philip, basically. And if Philip is dead, then it will be Charles, obviously the next in command. So we still very much under the British Crown. And if you just look at our political system as well, Johan Rupert and Nicky Oppenheimer for sure are the two main. And that's old apartheid money. That's old apartheid money that was controlling the country. It's still controlling the country. Johan Rupert employs 80% of the workforce in South Africa. 80% of the workforce in South Africa. When Jacob Zuma, our previous president, and he refused to sell out to the New World Order, Zuma, right? But he was a local mafia. They didn't make him innocent. And when Zuma wanted to fire Pravin Gordhan, who was our then finance minister, who obviously was in Johan Rupert's pocket, right? Rupert threatened to shut down the country. He threatened to shut down the country.
Wow.
So you want to tell me that that is not the shadow state? And then we've got to look at Johan Rupert. He looks all beautiful and peachy clean. He's the biggest property owner in South Africa. And then the whites, it's, the whites own the land. The whites own the... I'm like, dude, I don't own the land. You're looking at the wrong white face.
Yeah.
It's like that narrative that gets passed on. But meanwhile, the average white person, for example, on the street is not your problem. Those are the guys that are your problem. And they create this chaos because they benefit from it. They benefit from the apartheid narrative. So that whole, the whole British Crown that has controlled this country for the longest time. Yeah.
But who is the British Crown? The British Crown is the City of London, not necessarily the monarchy. The monarchy are agents of the British Crown.
Exactly.
The British Crown is the Vatican, the Pope, right?
Yes,
the Crown is the
yes,
Pope.
Yes,
so, and I guess this is what, if people haven't been watching the show, my assertion is that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein are both agents of the City of London, which make them agents of the Vatican. And they are the enforcement arm that's meant to keep this system in place. When somebody gets out, they blackmail them, they ruin or they get them to vote their way. They blackmail them, or in extreme instances, when they leave, they kill them. And so Jeffrey Epstein is a cog in the wheel. There's people like him all over the world in every single country. And like you're just explaining, and who conquered Africa, and what is the true goal of the British Crown is to bring Africa and the Middle East back into the Roman Empire to continue the slave trade, which again was the Roman Empire. And remember, when I first came on your show, they've been trying to recapture Africa back into their system. Africa itself is the Roman name of that part of the world, because it used to be known as Alkebulan, which means the Garden of Eden. And so Africa is a general. They called him the Africanus, and he was the Roman general that captured that part of the world for the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire never fell. And what we're seeing in all these different groups and everything we've talked about is the enforcement arm. And all the true goal is to enslave the entire planet under the system of taxation, because that's the true goal of the wars, is to create debt. And then you have people that are in debt slavery for the rest of humanity. So you have them working, they're taking care of themselves, they're feeding themselves, they're taking care of their children, but they're still giving you 50 to 75% of what they make. It's kind of you have more motivated slaves if you're not right under the system. And this is literally what they've done. And we are all living under the slave birth certificate system all over the world today. So if you're black or you're Asian, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. We are living in a master slave society. We really do. Think about it. Think about it. We all do.
So let's get back to our chat. Now, so this is one of the things you have to understand, that Walt Disney was a huge Hitler supporter, a socialist and a communist. A lot of his funding came from the CIA. He has all kinds of perversions in his different shows, especially if your children watch the Disney Channel today. I would watch what they're learning very, very closely. They have all this weird foot fetish stuff, and they're subliminally training your children into these weird things. So an alleged victim claimant in the lawsuit recently stated that the media, that Ghislaine was the Geppetto, And Epstein was a puppet like Pinocchio. Again, Ghislaine Maxwell comes from a generational family that comes from the system. So she, I believed, was the key person. And especially if you can look at her whole family is heavily involved. We covered how her sisters work, designed all the programs for the US government when they were in Israel. All of these strange contracts we have where Israel is controlling US information, and they put a backdoor into all of our government entities. And so they've been harvesting our information. So that, and I think her brother-in-law created the birth control pill because they're eugenicists. So this family, once you start digging into them, it's completely insane. They're just not random people. So she's using the Pinocchio story. That's why I brought up Disney. As you may recall, the Pinocchio story is about a man who wants a little boy so he can make him as a puppet. Pinocchio runs away and is captured by a man who kidnaps boys and takes them to Pleasure Island for money. Some of the adult characters meet one of the men, offering him a high price for the little boys. This is a child's story, okay? Another man sets out to kidnap a boy and gets paid. These boys never leave Pleasure Island, at least as boys. This is the Peter Pan story. Once you recognize this theme, and they always have them smoking and drinking and doing all these things little children shouldn't be doing. And if you understand that these child victims, a lot of their adults were partying with them, drinking them, watching porn while they were grooming them into...
Totally.
Right? So this is literally in numerous Disney plots and Disney shows. So does the storyline sound familiar to the Epstein and Maxwell victims? So is Epstein the mastermind genius touted by the media, or was Ghislaine the power behind the throne? Or have other players taken over for Robert Maxwell, like Wexner, and become handler of both people? So I think we did cover his career, how he started out at a private prep school. And anyways, he ended up at Bear Stearns. He was hired on by Bill Barr. Many people may remember he was in the first Bush administration and the second Bush administration. His father wrote this crazy book about sex slaves in space. He was the head of this school that hired Jeffrey Epstein, who was a professor he didn't have a college education, and apparently he wasn't that smart. He was devious, maybe, but according to people around him, they didn't feel that he was like this big genius. And we've all been around people who are extremely brilliant, and we know right away just from conversations with them. So after a stint in education, Epstein moved to Wall Street, and he was with the defunct Bear Stearns. Then he became the sole financial owner. So again, no one's ever been able to identify why Jeffrey Epstein had all that money. Robert Maxwell had mysteriously fallen off his boat when he was getting outed as a Nazi sympathizer, and his crimes during World War II were being exposed. And he also had stolen, I think, $600 million from the pension fund of the publishing company he owned. And he was trying to blackmail, he was in financial trouble. And according to Ben Menashe, he was trying to blackmail the blackmailers of the Israeli government, and they took him out. I personally believe he had a false death and was spirited back to Israel and is probably living there with Jeffrey Epstein. There's been pictures that have risen over the last few months here in the States that show a picture of Jeffrey Epstein with some slight plastic surgery walking around the streets of Tel Aviv. So he became the manager of Lex Wexner. And now a lot of people might know Lex Wexner. He was the CEO of the Limited Brands and Victoria's Secret. I'm not sure if you guys have those stores, but he had all the TWA jets that had the secret compartments. Remember, there was that airline guy who hid in the compartment. He stole a bunch of money and he exited the plane. So they had these planes that had secret stairwells. They claimed to be bringing in clothes from the Asia and countries that were being manufactured, but I believe they were bringing in women, primarily men too. So he's a self-described Jewish Israeli philanthropist, and he's tied to the Genovese crime family. And one of the ways that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and all these kind of people were kind of hitting in the same spots. As between Chicago and New York is Ohio. And Ohio was a great industrial state. It's really suffered over the last few years, but that was really the meat and potatoes there between those two countries. And people had a really good standard of living. They had a really excellent economy. They have a lot of the old underground ancient Tartaria systems from the civilization that existed here before Columbus supposedly discovered America. But they were doing a lot of land development, right? They were building out all kinds of housing. So Epstein was involved in that. Wexner was involved in that. Donald Trump was a big builder at the time. So you see a lot of these major power plays coming in at the same time. But originally I wrote this book 7 years ago. But when I got to the Genovese crime family, I became very concerned because they still are very active in the United States, and they still control large parts of California, especially San Francisco and Los Angeles, elements of the crime. The mafia is the enforcement and criminal arm of the Vatican system. And a lot of the original people that were the mafia people were actually Khazarians who had scattered out of Ukraine, Russia, Romania area after they were forced out of that area for the crimes they were committing against the people there. And you can see the Khazarians were also some of the conquistadors who committed the crimes on the Native Americans. And so they, and then the Rothschilds again come out of that family line, and they were the bankers of the Vatican system. And that structure really firmed up around the 17th century, and that we see them working together today. So once I saw the Genovese crime family, it opened my eyes to a lot of other things, because of course they're involved in the art industry, which is a completely fraudulent money laundering operation. A Picasso can't be as much as something that somebody painted with a brush and it doesn't even look like anything, right? So that a lot of money laundering is done through that industry. Lex Wexner was also involved in that. And those same jets where the CIA was transporting drugs and weapons during the Iran-Contra operation. All of those people are connected to those airplanes and those jets and those trade routes, even though they were supposedly bought for picking up all of the stuff for his clothing brands. Now, Lex Wexner stepped down from his position of chairman of the brands in 2020 after accusing Epstein of stealing millions from him during the time he was his money manager. So after 30 years of Jeffrey Epstein stealing money, trafficking children and all this, all of a sudden Lex Wexner, and he has his house in New York because things are military or intelligence operations when people give people their assets. What I try to explain is this system is what they call the Knights Templar system. The Knights Templar donated all of their holdings to the center of the right, and all their money went into like a group kind of thing. So they were allowed to have power, they were allowed to have homes, they were allowed to do that. But anytime they stepped outside the system, all those things were taken from them, because it's the system. You'll see people like Michael Jackson, his estate has never been dispersed. Elvis Presley, never been dispersed. You can go back through history. Even some of the most famous people say they're not leaving their children a dime because the money was never theirs in the first place. They were just kind of the figurehead of the money laundering or the business operation that was going. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, but I spent a lot of time following the money. I worked in the money world, and I worked myself in the city of London. I worked in communism, both in Russia, and I was in Venezuela. I was an advisor to the government during the fall of communism. So I'm very aware of the things that were going on in these countries. And it's taken me a long time to understand and share with other people what was really going down, because sometimes, especially as an outsider, you can only look back and see what happened, because when it's going on, you're not informed enough or know enough to see that you may see there's something going on, but you're not able to pinpoint it because you don't have all the knowledge. So as I was saying early, Jeffrey Epstein had an agent like him in every country. And one of the people that was, and they're all kind of goofy looking. They all come from supposedly wealthy families. But again, they're born into these systems. They're pledged from birth, or a lot, even times by their grandparents, even before they're born, their children are pledged in. This is why they use the MK mind control to break their minds and all these programming systems. He's associate and known predator of underage girls who was arrested in France for related crimes. In 2020, Jean-Luc Renel was arrested as part of the Epstein investigation. And according to the Paris prosecutors, Bernal is charged with assault, rape, and sexual harassment of various minors. And that's even in the mainstream media. They were reporting that. So, it must be prevalent news, because when the media finally has to explain what everybody else has been talking about for 2 years, they've been caught, and then they come in and they try to manufacture the story. And they all
recycle it.
Exactly. So they've all worked together for a period of years. They were trafficking girls. They were supposedly modeling talent agents. They would go out and recruit. They'd go to small towns. And, Epstein was supposedly, Donald Trump was the one who turned Epstein in, because one of the girls that worked was one of Epstein's people, was a masseuse at Mar-a-Lago. And Mar-a-Lago was built to be the Winter White House. It's very interesting that Trump owns a lot of the buildings. He owns the original Benjamin Franklin post office. That was the original City of London Post under Admiralty law here in the United States. So he owns a lot of pivotal things that, like Lincoln spent his year during the Civil War at Mar-a-Lago. And there's always been the story that actually that Donald Trump is a descendant of Abraham Lincoln. We'll do that on another story. But and again, he tried to do some of the same things that Lincoln was trying to do while they tried to kill Lincoln. I personally am up in the air about Donald Trump. If he does something good, I'm like, great. But I also believe that we're under a lot of managed opposition. So I pray and hope, and even God uses different people in different ways. So I pray and hope that people like him and that are in those places. What we find out after war is a lot of the people that we thought were on our side were actually traitors, and the people that were traitors come out to be the people who are really working for the people. So once you've studied, if you study war, you learn that this is, God is the person who can judge, not me. And again, Moses was a murderer. Noah was a drunk. So God used them to his device. And God's using me and you today in the way that we're doing these things. Because really we're
God's favorite F-bomb child.
Well, we're exposing Satan's agenda and the eternal battle between good and evil, right?
Well, exactly, and at the end of the day, it's about,
I guess I'm just going to talk a little bit about Wexner again. He's the only client Epstein had, and the origin of the money remains a mystery. No one on Wall Street can identify the deals where Epstein made his money or the hedge fund he claimed to manage. One of the few business schemes FC is linked to is the Tower Financial controversy. Epstein met Hoffenberg through the UK arms dealer Doug Scalise. And this was not so complicated Ponzi scheme that landed the other partner, Hoffenberg, in jail. And they had defrauded investors of over $475 million. Whenever you do find anything Jeffrey Epstein worked in, there's usually mass amounts of missing money, including like Robert Maxwell was the same. Whatever he touched, massive. And he also went around and Robert Maxwell forcibly acquired first under open offers and then under hostile takeovers, all of the educational book printing companies, destroyed all of the history that we had and reprinted all the history books. And this was happening right around the time that the Federal Reserve made its final move, took us off the gold standard, and the Federal Reserve had complete control of the United States. What we'd left Britain several hundred years ago to get away from. And that system is what we're breaking out of right now. And if we saw the ritual where the King of England handed Donald Trump back the power, we just saw that corporate structure that the United States has been under since the Civil War has now been collapsed. The question is what structure is now in control of us, and is it to our benefit, or have they just changed the hats in the closet, right? They just put a new shirt on for a different year. Yeah.
Two wings of the same bird. I did a show on that on South Africa, actually, talking about the two wings of the same bird. There's always going to be, but then the bird, you know, we have the political parties flapping away at each other that actually keep the bird in flight, right?
Yeah.
And the bird itself is the system, and it's going exactly where it's always intended to go.
Right.
And we've got to see who's handling the bird, who's holding the handle. And I'm
pointing out to you who the truly mechanisms are. And I believe, and actually it's the Jesuit Pope, the Dark Pope, but the Vatican itself is controlled by the Holy See. So I'd say that's probably like the Medici, those old Phoenician banking system. And also the Scandinavians. A lot of people believe that banking system started with the Venetians. But if you go way, way back, the first slave banks, money started with slave money, happened in the Scandinavian and like Dutch countries.
Yes.
And they have, I don't even know how to say the names because those languages have really unusual sounds. But you can go, I have it written down in my research. It'll be in my book. And showing how the original banks were slave banks, because they had so much money. When you take, and the Nazi concentration camps were slave camps. They made hundreds of millions of dollars in the products produced and exported from Germany in those camps. So all war is about debt and slavery, right? And who in the Roman system has control over the orphans, according to Annam Sanctum. The declaration the Pope made about over 1,000 years ago about how he owns the world and he owns every animal, planet, and piece of land in the world. And that's how he claimed also the orphans under the Justinian deception. So what is the major, they first finance and cause the wars, and what's left over after the war? Children. Exactly. So they come and take all the children, and then legally under the doctrine they enforced upon us, the Vatican had the right to take the children. And so that's what we're seeing, all these children. One of the big problems in the Middle East and Turkey, and we've had with the EU during the conflict with Ukraine, because they wanted more help from Turkey. But Turkey wanted to know where the 85,000 children they'd given the EU were, that had come in from Syria, all little boys. And they started arguing about that publicly. And then all of a sudden the United Nations was calling Erdogan this and that, and he's the enemy and we should kick him out of the UN. And so finally they came up with 11,000 children they could show the Turkish government. They gave them 11,000 of the 85,000 children. And still to this day, nobody knows where the rest of those children are. Just like in the United States, the government processed over 350,000 children under the Obama administration and did not require any kind of, people were just picking them up. They were dropping them off. I've heard drivers' testimony. In the middle of the night, they would be just dropping children off at these random houses and neighborhoods that were picked up. And through the the Trump administration, they've recovered half those children, but they're still in search of the other half of those children right now today.
Well, I sincerely hope they find them. And that
me too. And we just can pray and just hope. And now that there's more awareness, so I don't know, we've kind of gone on for an hour, and so I didn't know if that was too long for your viewers.
No, we're good. We hour and 25, we're good.
Okay.
We had a good innings today. I'm not sure though if there's anything else you want to just wrap up with before we.
Okay, well, I was going to point out, we might leave this for next time because I really want to get into the eugenics program and how it's been discovered that they are using the sex to kind of cover up. At first, it was the child, all of the elite and the sex escapades. But really, what Jeffrey Epstein, if you've read the Epstein files and you've read the documents, they were white supremacists, and they hated everybody, including white people, Christians or Jews, or they adopted Judaism as a cultural, called secular Judaism. Right? So they adopted as a cultural identity instead of people who descended from the tribe of Israel, right? So this is a whole where they don't believe in God. And this comes out of Sabbatai Zebi, the guy who was one of the practitioners of Baal worship. And he declared himself to be the Jewish Messiah. There's an amazing book called Sabbatai Zebi, 1666, and that talks about how really anti-Semitism really began in Europe in some ways, because over the half of the people who were openly Jewish converted to what they believed was called redemption through sin. So in order to be redeemed by God, you had to commit every atrocity, incest, pedophilia, murder, rape. And that's what Jill Biden, her great-great-grandfather, we always hear about Jacob Frank. Okay, so he was traveling through Turkey and he heard about this Sabbatai Zebi thing. Over half the Jews in Europe converted to this, and this is the ancient Baal worship we saw the Jews convert to when Moses led them out. This is the same religion that Islam practices today. So nothing new under the sun. These things have been repeated. And we're seeing this going on right now. And this is the conflict. Like, for instance, when like Esau and Jacob scattered, a lot of the Edomites, Edom means red in ancient Hebrew, the descendants of Esau, the Edomites went up into Italy and to Greece. And so those were the original tribes that settled there. And then you had this wave of people who were forcibly converted to Judaism or Christianity. It would just depend on what they chose, but majority converted to Judaism, and they moved into Eastern Europe, and they were secretly still practicing the Baal worship. And just like they were doing when they were left out in the desert and they turned against God again. So this is an age-old story. It's not a statement against any particular group, because of course, a lot of the people who are forcibly converted do believe in those faiths. So we're just seeing the culmination of so many things. But one of the main things is these people believe they're genetically superior. People like Bill Gates. I mean, do you look at him and think, wow, that is a specimen of a man. We really need to preserve that guy's sperm, right? No one says that. None of these people.
Said no one ever.
No one ever said that, right? So again, you have to understand that a majority of Silicon Valley executives are practicers of this, and they hold all these dark ceremonies, and they also are inverse gender, because in order to be a high level in the United Nations, you have to practice gender inversion. So Bill Gates and his wife are a great example. It's pretty obvious once you look at them that they're in the opposite points. So
and I definitely want to look like some of those British royals.
Well, Lindsay, this is the crazy thing. So, but of course, Zorro Ranch, which was I don't know if you guys have heard about Zorro Ranch.
Yeah.
It's and Bill Richards went with the governor, and he has also mysteriously died. He had a heart attack, I think. But you'll notice a lot of the people named in the Epstein files aren't around anymore, even though they weren't that old. I mean, they were old enough to die, but they were really not. Right? They have great health care. They have a lot of money. You notice that really wealthy people don't die too young because they have all the options. They also have access to the newer medicine. You could go to Switzerland and get cured for heroin for 25 years in 3 days, right? They've had the med beds in Switzerland for a long time. I just got to try my first med bed. It was amazing. Oh my, have you guys heard of med beds?
I'm so not into med beds. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. But hey, I'd like to know your experience about that anyway.
It was excellent. It was super positive. Everybody who did it, you just lay on a thing. It's really quiet. You don't really do anything. You just lay on the frequency. And when you get off the table, the pain you had is gone. Yeah. RFK Jr., the girl that's there, she's friends with RFK Jr. She lives in Beverly Hills, close to him. And she goes over and he had hip replacement surgery recently. And he couldn't walk. And after using her bed for a week, he was fine. So here in the States, we're having positive feedback. I also got to use the Tesla plasma balls.
Right.
And these are like they're like in there, in the side of the ball. It's like training.
Wow.
And then they had frequency saunas. So I tried that. And then they had these baths. I don't know if you've ever seen the bath that turn the water into ions and it pulls all the toxins out of your body. And so that was amazing too. So part of this conference, alternative medicine, someone who goes to medical school today is probably going to have a really hard time in 20 years making money in their practice, because all of this stuff has been hidden for a really long time and it's coming to fruition. But one of the scary ways that the medical industry has taken from us is they're really into eugenics, and a lot of the money that's being made by the big pharma companies are trying to create like these superior races. They just actually arrested a guy in California. All the Chinese like leaders are trying to come over here and groom their own families and raise them as young communists here in the United States. They just took out a big baby farm in Southern California where this Chinese guy had fathered over 30 children to surrogates. And this is what Jeffrey Epstein wanted to build his own super race. And they kind of blame it on Epstein, but this is really the government of the United States.
The Nazis,
right.
The Nazis.
Exactly. It's all the same stuff. And Zorro Ranch, did you have the lady on your show that was talking about? I've seen a few interviews. I thought I saw it on your show. And she was talking about Yeah,
Juliet Bryant, the South African.
Right. Okay. So that was the interview that I saw then. So they're running a big, and to this day, Zorro Ranch has never been inspected by the FBI, never been inspected by any of the government branches or the military or the local authorities. So, and again, it's in New Mexico, which is close to the Mexican border. There's probably massive underground tunnel systems. You had someone like a famous actor like Gene Hackman die recently. They found underground systems in his home. And so, and not far from the Zorro Ranch. So they're finding all these things that are there's massive tunnel systems between Mexico and the US. And they've spent the last few years sealing them up with cement, but there's so many of them. It's really hard to know, but I think that's where a lot of the stolen money, because they never use their own money. They always use our money to enslave us. And Jeffrey Epstein didn't go to college, but he had his own office at Harvard. So what was he doing at Harvard? And if you'll notice, quite a few of the major educational, and I think they were doing a lot of it out of Arizona State University too. And a lot of these universities were closed for several years after COVID. And the students didn't go back. They're wanting to do in some instances can you imagine trying to send your kid to Stanford and being told you need to do the classes online for $75,000 a year or whatever it is?
Not going to work. Yeah. Wow.
So Sunny, did we want to kind of wrap up for the day? And I was going to introduce you to Sunny.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, he's got one quick call that he's on, and then he'll come in and I'll kind of wrap up. So again, Bill Richardson has passed away, but the other amazing thing that he was doing after he was heavily involved with the Clintons and stuff down in Haiti, he went down into I forget that country. It's a country in Asia, and I want to say Myanmar, maybe. Sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, But he went down with the Global Clinton Initiative, and he helped that government with the Hillary Clinton Initiative. And she's the one who oversaw the overthrow of Ukraine and the Orange Revolution there, and was running her campaign out of the U.S. Embassy in the Ukraine. She went down to Myanmar to help those people get on track of democracy. Anyways, that country is known to be one of the biggest human trafficking. They're processing and exporting all the heroin and stuff that comes out of China. And so that whole Bill Richards was down there imposing communism on those people, and then he came back to the States, and then he passed away as soon as his stuff his name came out in all the Epstein files. And I think that there's something much more huge. I think they're doing gene editing. They're possibly creating mixing animals and people. And I actually heard someone talk on this at the event and talking about the
chimeras. Chimeras.
Well, they're talking about the things that the military people have found when they went into some of these. Some people are in therapy for years after for seeing some of the things that they found in some of these deep underground military bases and those homes of the ruling. They call him elite because El, right? El is God. So I don't like to call them elite because they believe they're descended from the gods. So I know elite is the word that we all use, and it does indicate who we're talking about, but these people are not godly. El, right? Bethel, house of God. That's a lot of people go to Bethel Church. So, and even when you understand the old, it was originally El who took the power. Yahweh took the power from El when you read the Older Testament and you actually understand it. So throughout history, we have all of these people, from like Esau and Jacob, stealing the identity and the birthright of the older brother and taking that birthright. And this is a common theme we always see in so many movies, from like The Count of Monte Cristo. All the old classic books have this reoccurring theme of the stolen identity and the true king and the true tree being hidden from us. So I think that's a reoccurring theme in our movies for a reason, and something that may come forward. I was talking about Myanmar, and is the top human trafficking country in the world, alongside China and South Sudan, apparently, according to the numbers I looked up. And these numbers are actually a couple years old. I believe Ukraine was in the top 10, and Ukraine has beautiful people, especially the women are very attractive there. So I literally interviewed a soldier that said in the camps that were supposed to be refugee camps, they had they'd been in human trafficking operations before, and they divided the attractive women, the ugly women, the attractive children, the ugly children. I mean, I don't think there's anything such thing as ugly children, right?
Never.
And this is how it's classified. So those, the unattractive people will be sold into forced labor, or their organs will be harvested. And then the attractive people will be sold into the sex slave system. And again, it was Hillary Clinton who took the credit for the biggest Democratic vote that ever occurred in Myanmar. And again, democracy is a word of communism. The forefathers of our country were also they gave us a republic. They gave us a constitutional republic if we could keep it. And they literally say that in their founding documents, because they knew that democracy would seep in, and that eventually democracy would be what would destroy our country. And that's what we see today. Yep. So, so I'm just waiting for Sunny to come back. And
I need to sign off. Sorry, I've got another appointment right now.
Sure.
So I would love to meet Sunny next time then.
Sure.
If he's still around, or to do a show. I just have to sign off now because I do have another appointment. But it was wonderful to have you back. Maybe next week or the week after.
Probably the week after. I'm going to be on the road again next week. I've got a lot of conferences this time. Oh, here's Sunny.
All right, what's all this fuss about?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, Sunny, this is my friend, Shanti.
I have to put on my little shades here. Hi, how are you doing,
Hey,
Shanti?
good. How are
And
you?
she's a podcaster down in South Africa.
Very cool.
Nice
And
to meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too.
well,
And carry on.
I was just going to kind of introduce a little. Sonny is a stuntman and actor in Hollywood. We've been friends for 25 years. He's worked on a lot of big movies. He's worked around the Hollywood scene. He's worked in Europe. He's actually formerly, grew up in Canada. And so I think it would just be fun for us to have us on his show. He's worked with a lot of the big stars, and we frequently cover so many different difficult topics that it's really nice to see someone. Sonny had a dream when he was younger, and he wanted to be a stuntman, and everybody made fun of him and told him he would never be able to do it. And everybody thought he was crazy. And then he went to Hollywood, and he's worked with every major star pretty much, worked in different countries. And so his story is one that if you dream enough and you believe enough, that your life can be what you want it to be.
Well, I definitely look forward to chatting with you because I was just saying to Simone before as well, we're really great to talk to an original stuntman, right? How cool.
Right. Yeah. So no, I've been blessed. I've had a pretty great career, and as Simone was saying, I did start out in Canada. My parents were pretty active in the restaurant and hotel field, so they really kind of wanted me to follow those footsteps, and I did for a while. But my heart was to go to Hollywood and be a stuntman. At the time, Canada was just kind of getting started with doing more of movies outside of indie films. They didn't really have budgets prior. And then once certain deals were done, the U.S. started coming into Canada, and I had an opportunity to basically dive into it. When I was very young, like I'm 12, 13, I was already doing things on my motorcycle and the skateboards that one should not be doing. It's almost equivalent to the X Games now. And then it came from a background where I had horses and broke horses. So, and I was an athlete in so many sports. So it was kind of where my knack I felt was, my heart was. So I started right after graduation. I went to Vancouver, hit the pavement, started at that, and progressively got my first, stunt job, and then second. And then at the time they were bringing in actors from Hollywood just for one line. And I was like, I could say that line. So I started going to acting school at the same time. So then it was like acting stunts. And when I hit around 30 films in both fields, I had an opportunity to coordinate or to be the stunt double for Tarzan in Mexico. And I went there and I worked the first season as a stuntman, but then all of a sudden I was kind of, giving producers my 2 cents on camera angles and how stunts, because we have the Mexican coordinator at the time, sort of had his way of doing it. And I kind of thought of the way I saw it. And so be it, the next season, they made me the coordinator. So then I was doubling Tarzan and doing stunts. And then when that gig ended after 3 seasons, I went back to Vancouver. And then there was an opportunity to read for a season starring role with the same producers. I did that and got that. And they then allowed me to come to the States and sponsored me and so forth. And I made that move in 1993. And I've been in Los Angeles ever since. Working mostly as an actor / my own stunts. I double some stars or some actors. One of the latest was on Captain Marvel, Rune Tempe, and so forth. So I worked with Dolph Lundgren and things like that. But that acting sort of, my forte is playing the action bad guy mostly. I've played good guys, and I've done all genres from daytime TV on Young and Restless to comedies and film and TV. So I kind of hit all elements of it. And now I've moved to Las Vegas I created a bandage company called Propain, Propain, and that's sort of my next basic dream is get this going, which I am and have, and we produce a really cool product, outperforming the standard bandages. We've won awards for them, and now we're putting them in on Amazon and getting them into pharmacies and your local sports store and so forth. So yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Well, I look forward to having you back in the future where we can go more into that. I really do. So thank you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to sign off. I'm late already for a previous meeting.
Okay.
So I will send you good wishes, and I look forward to having you guys back.
Absolutely.
All right,
Thanks so much.
Thanks
It was a
to
pleasure
everyone
meeting
in
you.
South Africa.
Bye-bye.
God bless you all. Bye. If this broke something open, if you recognized yourself in the testimony, if your body responded before your mind understood, the next step isn't more information. It's pattern work. Decode what your nervous system built to survive. Dismantle the story that keeps it running. Reorganize through the body and choose, actually choose, from the person you're becoming, not from the pattern that formed when you were too small to choose. That's Solutions. Link below. The body is the record. Let's listen.